continue with our debate as we have an outlook on the transport roads to, of course, the COP26 going ahead and debating about the role of global partnerships for a net zero future. And with me and with you, ladies and gentlemen, is now the facilitator of the session, Eleonore Francois-Jacobs.
Thank you, Katie. I'm joining here again from Mobilize Your City Global Secretariat in Brussels. I'm really impressed by everything we've heard so far. It was really, really nice. We're now already coming to the closing session of this first Mobilize Your City Global Forum, where I'm really honored to welcome three great speakers. So I am here today with Henri Waisman, lead of the initiative Deep Decarbonization Pathways at IDDRI, Maruxa Cardama, Secretary General of the Sustainable and Low Carbon Transport Partnership, SLOCAT, and André Eckermann, Head of the Competence Center for Energy and Transport at GmbH. Welcome to the three of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. So a lot of what is being discussed now is actually going to shape what is feasible to do in cities in the future. And we have heard this morning about the importance of acting together and with urgency. So we need to set up the right motion for what needs to happen in cities now. So in this session, we would like to address how this all links to global climate processes. Let me start by asking you a first question, Henri. You have been among the architects of the Paris Agreement. Can you tell us about the role of partnerships in implementing the Paris Agreement, and in particular in the urban sector? So actually, maybe in 2 minutes, can you tell us what works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. Just to say concretely, the Paris Agreement is fundamentally about partnerships. It's about providing a framework that can help organize the partnerships. There are three components of that. The Paris Agreement defines a common political attractor, carbon neutrality, which is basically something that provides a guide for all actors to align their expectation and to cooperate. It provides an innovative paradigm that's built on the bottom-up vision, so starting from real-world actor that acknowledges the importance of non-state actors, and that talks about the content of the transformation that's really embedded in the Paris Agreement. And it organizes a process, which is maybe the most important thing to have in mind when we think concretely what it means, and notably the regular revisions of the commitments that are taken by the different actors, and notably a very important moment that is ahead of us. So obviously COP26 is very important, but to some extent for partnerships, what will happen just after COP26 will be even more important. That's this moment that will be the global stocktake, which will happen formally in 2023, but it means that there will be a period 2022-2023 where all the actors will have to be mobilized in order to understand where we can better share best practices, where we can better cooperate in order to provide all the information that is required to enhance the ambition. We already know that a current contribution by the countries are not sufficient to achieve the global goal, but it's not a problem as long as we have a clear process to learn from each other, to cooperate together in order to progressively enhance. And the real question would be whether the 2025 nationally determined contribution will be significantly improved compared to what they are today, and whether they better align with the carbon neutrality objective. And for that, the establishment of clear processes for partnerships between different actors, and notably where cities play a key role, will be really critical. So that's basically 2022 and 2023 is really the moment for the non-state actors and notably the cities to be at the front line of the climate ambition discussion.
Thank you very much, Henri. This is really, really helpful. Before going back to your answer, let me ask another question to Maruxa. Most countries acknowledge that transport is a key sector to achieve the objectives expressed in the Paris Agreement. However, as we just heard, only few countries are taking commitments that are high enough to achieve the targets that are set. So what does this mean for the transport sector? What needs to happen concretely, in particular in the coming decade?
Wow, that's a great question, Eleonore. And first and above all, congratulations, really, on this first day Global Forum of Mobilize Your City. I think it's given us the opportunity of seeing the great work that you are really doing in the field, with very, very concrete actors in different countries and different cities. So really kudos to making it happen, to all your supporters and to this forum as well. Well, a lot of things need to happen. And I think that as a community, we need to take to these international spaces a series of notions that perhaps for us are very well known, but that we still need to socialize. I could say that importance of integrated, avoid, shift and improve strategies is something that we need to continue socializing at the international arena, emphasizing really the need to decouple growth, economic growth from the motorization rates that we saw in the past century, helping perhaps the international community unpack this notion of proximity-based planning, the 15-minute city, but with a perspective from the global south, isn't it? What does it mean for a global south city? Also, of course, making sure that everybody understands that we cannot afford to let our public transport systems collapse, particularly in cities in the global south where they are many times inexistent already, isn't it? Preserving those great experiments that we've seen in the cities across the global south, open streets during the pandemic, great examples that were shown just a few moments ago by your participants. I think that all of that is essential. And of course, bringing this notion of the sustainable urban mobility plans that you're so great at, and trying to make sure that they are even more expanded in different geographies. But fundamentally, what we need, I think, Eleonore, is to offer concrete pathways. And I think that this is probably the moment for all of us to celebrate the launch of the latest version of the Marrakesh Partnership, a global action pathway for the transport sector. Just to help us understand what this Marrakesh Partnership platform is, for those who might not be very familiar with it, is the place within the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change where we can actually come together, governments, cities, regions, business, innovators and financiers that actually need to make climate change happen on the ground. SLOCAT and the ITF, we have the honor of being the focal points for the engagement of the transport sector in this Marrakesh Partnership. And the Climate Action Pathway for Transport, what it's trying to do is to provide a vision towards 2050 with the specific milestones for this year, for 2025, for 2030 and for 2040 to get to that vision. It's an organic document, and here comes this notion of a latest edition that we are launching today. What is this latest edition doing? It's trying to really enhance key elements that we've also heard from the very opening of your forum today: just transition, gender responsiveness, interlinkages across areas. I would like to really invite all our participants to go to the United Nations Framework Convention Climate Change webpage and have a look at that pathway, put it at their service, and very much keep on providing the feedback, isn't it? With a particular thanks, if you allow me, Eleonore, to you and your colleagues in the team, and to GIZ colleagues as well, who have been fundamental in getting us to this specific latest edition. I think it helped us see that policy is essential, but not any type of policy. Policy that enables open data, that enables these multi-stakeholder governance and partnerships that you're so characteristic of, and that actually puts us on the right track of very specific actions for subnational governments and national governments to work together.
Thank you very much, Maruxa. This is really interesting, and congratulations on this launch today. So let me turn now to André before giving you an opportunity to answer what has been said already. So André, Mobilize Your City was launched at COP21 and you were there. And at the heart of our action is this idea of creating enabling frameworks for cities to transition to sustainable mobility. We heard a little bit about that from our members in the previous session. Can you tell us more about it and what cities need concretely to achieve systemic transformation and to better contribute to achieving the nationally determined contribution, the so-called NDCs?
I will try, but first of all, thanks a lot for inviting me. As you can easily see from my background, I'm a big fan of the partnership. I was part of the team that had the honor to give birth to the initiative. As you said, I participated as well in the COP21 and 22 in Marrakesh, where we first met in the bigger group. I remember long and inspiring discussions with the different partners of the partnership, with the European Commission, AFD, GIZ colleagues, CODA2, and the different donors. But let's maybe as well remember where the partnership came from, where we started 5 years ago. And what was the case for action when we started thinking about designing this partnership? I think on the one hand side, we had acknowledged that urban transport emissions have quite a relevant share in the global and as well of the transport emissions as such. So there's a clear need for action. Then urban transport, we heard this in the morning as well from Paolo Ciccarelli, is sort of the backbone of the entire life in a city. And then put yourself in the shoes of a city. Huge challenges, often little financial and technical resources, but growing expectations in terms of livable cities and as well climate protection. But the cities often have little to say in national policy making, and they had no voice in the UNFCCC regime. So that was sort of where we said, well, cities are a very relevant player, but often unheard nationally, but as well internationally. And that's, I think, how the Mobilize Your City mission came into play, which maybe put easily into 5 words is empowering cities to transform mobility. And then coming back to your question, how does the partnership try to do so? I think there's sort of a multi-layer approach at the city level, but then as well national level in the countries. And as a global partnership, of course, as well an international level. So at city level, I think we recognize that planning is essential. So we try to export and tailor the European SUMP, the Sustainable Mobility Planning Tool, to different city types in the developing world. And it helps to create or derive roadmaps and clear milestones for the next 10, 20 years for the mobility transition. And then what we recognized, and I think this is a bit unique for the partnership as well, is that cities often they cannot do alone. So they depend on support from national level. So we built in this national mobility programs and plans as well, the NUMPs, as an integral part of the partnership, recognizing that cities need more technical and financial support as well from the national level. And then as a global partnership at the international level, I think we see the clear value as well as working as a partnership. So enabling peer-to-peer learning between cities and national governments, speeding up the learning curve, creating as well confidence in the feasibility of change by these exchanges, which I think is quite important. Joining forces between different donors, so working with coherent methodologies, which is more efficient, and so on. And I think the results that you just published a couple of weeks ago in the Mobilize Your City Global Monitor, which I recommend to read, are quite, they speak for themselves. I mean, more than 60 cities, 15 countries, 5 donors. And with the 40 million donor money, you leveraged 1 billion of finance for the implementation of the measures identified in already 6 completed SUMPs and 4 completed NUMPs.
Thank you very much, André. Thank you all for these really interesting points. So let me come back to some of what has been said, because you've touched on a lot of issues. So maybe going back to you, Henri, you mentioned the global stocktake. Can you tell us a bit more about that and about the role of partnerships in it?
Yeah, so that's this global stocktake idea is one of the key innovation of the Paris Agreement. It aims at having a collective discussion that aims at supporting reinforcement of ambition by the actors. And so this is kind of a milestone, an interim step in the middle of these cycles of revisions of ambition, notably by governments, but also by other actors. And so a moment that needs to be created to put all the important topics on the table and to identify notably where these collective partnerships can help unlock some of the challenges that actors and notably governments are facing when trying to look for themselves the type of ambition they can consider. And so I think that this is a moment that is very important to highlight, both to share the best practices. So that's an opportunity to have this collective moment to make sure that different actors, and again, it's a moment that is not limited to the government. Basically, COP26 and 2025 will be a moment for governments, because this is a moment where they need to submit the indices. But in the middle, this global stocktake is really the moment for other actors and non-state actors to play a more central role. And this is a moment notably to share best practices or to share challenges, to share difficulties that some actors may be facing as a way to understand if there are some solutions that can be envisaged by looking at what others are doing. And it's also an opportunity to identify opportunities for cooperation, because if there is one thing that the Paris Agreement introduces, is that it moves from a world of competition, where we would working under the assumption of burden sharing, who does more than the neighbor, to a world of cooperation and achieving, if there is one message that science communicates very clearly, that achieving global carbon neutrality as recommended by the Paris Agreement cannot work if we don't have a multi-layer cooperation among actors. And I think that this is notably one of the very important things that your initiative can be doing, can be playing a central role. First, to help, and I've heard a lot about this idea of planning, making sure that the cities, these very key actors, notably when taking into account the inertias of the system, can do these plans, and can do this plan not only to 10 or 15 years, but do these plans backcasting from the requirements from carbon neutrality by the middle of the century as recommended by the Paris Agreement. And second, this initiative, because it combines all these actors from the city at the city scale, can also try to share some common messages that other actors need to hear. Basically, what do cities need from other actors? And it was mentioned, the role of governments, but also the role of private sector, the role of other important actors that need to be around the table. What do they need to know about the requirements for cities to transform towards this long-term goal? And I think that these are the two things that we could be expecting to happen in the lead up to this global stocktake in the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. That's really helpful, and we are taking notes of our mission for the next month. Maruxa, you work with SLOCAT to bring together all these actors around one table and to build up a coherence maybe in our action. So in particular, in the context of taking part in the climate processes, can you tell us what are the main challenges?
Well, I think it's a combination of factors. If you want a bit, is the cacophony of voices that sometimes we can feel, isn't it? There's a lot of voices that go to these international processes. I think that in this case, I mean, picking up on what André was using as well to characterize the work of Mobilize Your City, that notion of coherence of efforts, isn't it? That notion of already having some big bilateral cooperation agencies, some big doers in the field, some big entities providing technical assistance coming together to really align their efforts. I think that helps a lot already to what then we can take to the international arena and to these moments of international global reflection that Henri was talking about. So I think that is one challenge, if you want. Another challenge can be a bit the inward-looking perspectives of each of the different sectors, including ourselves as a transport community, that go to those international spaces, isn't it? The fact that we go there a bit to talk among ourselves. I'm just characterizing things by exaggeration, not saying that that's what we're doing, but that is a challenge and that is a risk. So I think that the beauty of it all, as Henri was pointing out, is that collaboration is a must in the implementation of Paris Agreement and certainly in climate action in any city. And we see it with the partnerships that you establish, for instance, when you provide support to cities to come up with a SAMP, isn't it? So we need to take that as well to the international spaces. Use mobility in cities as that connector for the transport community that goes to international arenas to talk with the health community, to talk with, even better, the urban development community, to talk with the scientists, the social scientists that are helping us understand behavioral change and how to capitalize on some of the things that we've experienced during the pandemic, isn't it, in terms of changing mobility patterns. So I could say it's very much those two, if you want. Get out of our own shell, connect with others, connect with those specific transformations that are occurring society-wide and that are very much touching upon transport, and that transport and mobility can help accelerate in positive ways, and then be able a bit to translate, isn't it, into very specific collaborative actions and very specific milestones, what we are bringing to those spaces. Those are some of the challenges, but I think that And a lot has been accomplished by this community over the past 10 years or so, 10, 15 years of engagement. I think we have learned a lot. And I think we have to be very proud of the fact that as a sector, transport is recognized in this platform called the Marrakesh Partnership, isn't it? There are different sectors, areas that are being recognized as areas that support the landing of climate action into real specific actions. And we just have to capitalize on that and keep working and keep bringing what is being delivered in the ground to these international spaces.
Thank you, Maruxa. And yeah, I mean, André, you were talking about how you've been there at the very beginning and you saw this challenge of bringing up the voice of cities. Can you tell us if now, 5 years later, you see the difference, and do you see their representation having changed and their resources having increased?
Yes, I think, I mean, in that regard, and not only because of Mobilize Your City partnership, of course, but I mean, in general terms, there has been a huge change in terms of the representation as well of non-state actors in the climate change negotiations. I think that has changed a lot, but looking from sort of a bird's eye perspective on the negotiations and what the planet needs to do, I think there's still a huge challenge before us. And I think it's important to highlight that we do not only, when I listen to the negotiations, I hear a lot about the ambition gap, but I think it's not only about the ambition gap, we have a huge implementation gap, and especially if we look on transport with the long implementation times of projects and the lock-in effect risks, I think we really need to give a push to act now and maybe not to launch at every COP 20 new initiatives, but rather build on existing ones and shape them and so on. So I think this is really what I would desire for the next years.
Thank you. It's nice to hear the enthusiasm that comes from the three of you, because I think we heard this message this morning from Vera that was also saying, like, don't think the task ahead is too big to start even acting on it. Sometimes it does feel a little bit overwhelming, and you were mentioning, Henri, how we know that for a fact the ambitions from countries are not yet at the level where they need to be. So it is a challenge to keep pushing in the right direction. So you've been touching on a lot of things. I would like to give you a possibility to answer to each other at that stage before asking you a final question. Is there any comment? Henri, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this idea of plans at the city level that were mentioned by my two fellow panelists. And I think that this is indeed critical, and even more critical in the context of the Paris Agreement, where what we are talking about is not to create marginal deviations from current trends, but really to imagine something that is a fundamental transformation. And just to mention that the word that's used in the climate negotiation is long-term strategies. So there is an instrument that is already introduced at the core of the Paris Agreement to do this type of work. So mid-century strategies to investigate this question. And it's even more important for actors like City to engage in this route. So again, strategies to the long term that backcast from this long-term requirement to define the short-term action that need to be done. Because we know that many of the levers of the transformation globally and in countries are in the hands of the cities. Transforming the transport sector without transforming the city is just impossible. And it's essential that there is a clear definition by the cities themselves of what they would need to do or what they could do in order to reach a massive transformation, because that's a condition to be able then to send this clear information to the governments, to the other actors, to the donors, to say them, yes, we can transform drastically, but there are a number of things that are not in our hands. A number of these levers are in our hands, but a number of these levers are also in the hands of other actors, and they need to be aware. And so these plans, these strategies should be seen as really the key instrument, not only for the cities to reflect on their own transformation, but also to communicate to the other actors what are the type of requirements for the cities to be able to play the role they can play in the massive transformation. So that's really the front line of this discussion, and probably something that is already done, but that need to be continued in the coming years.
Thank you very much. Maruxa, would you like to go next?
A quick reflection, if I may, on the nationally determined contributions, those frameworks in which the countries are supposed to tell us the plans for decarbonizing, isn't it, in the next few years. And indeed, I mean, there's mitigated news there in the sense that with the NDCs that have been submitted so far as of May, there is a 70% of them which are covering transport. That is good news. The less good news is that only a 15% or so are actually specifying measures, concrete measures. Is only a modest improvement so far from what we had in previous rounds of these framework documents, the NDCs. And perhaps another interesting trend is that there is a prevailing focus on measures around improving vehicles and fuels, when we know that they are essential, of course, for reducing emissions in cities, but we also know that preserving walking and cycling, making it safer, isn't it? Bringing that infrastructure to scale, putting the emphasis on public transport systems as an equitable backbone, isn't it, of mobility. Those things are perhaps still lacking a bit. And I think that tells us about the narratives that we use and how we need to harness some of the current transformations that we are seeing, including electric mobility, to spearhead wider notions, isn't it, of the entire transformation that is needed in our mobility systems, and making sure in this 5-year cycle that Henri was talking about, making sure that we support countries and those departments in countries which are holding the pen, to then write these nationally determined contributions, to understand these notions and see how they relate to the specific needs of their countries and their cities. That is perhaps, there's always good news in the sense that, picking up on what André was saying, there is indeed a good trend. The nationally determined contributions in previous rounds didn't have this reflection of transport. So we are going in the right direction. What we need now is more specificity, and we need to support that specificity in these framework documents.
Thank you, Maruxa. André, do you like to answer some of this?
Yeah, well, maybe as well, congratulating SLOCAT a bit for their work, because this orchestrating of the cacophonic voices, as you said, is a very challenging task. And I think it's very important as well from the partnerships that form part of the Marrakesh Partnership to bring this to the UNFCCC level. I think that's a very important function that you play there. What I think what would be nice is as well communicating that these SUMPs are really useful to have a clear roadmap for the mobility transition. And as well, I mean, they sort of can help the countries obviously to achieve their NDCs. And maybe what, taking up Henri's point with the backcasting and linking it with a wish to the partnership, I think, I mean, one step forward would be now to think of some pioneer cities, I mean, really going for net zero by 2050. Maybe this could be as well something that the partnership takes up. I think that the European Commission is starting a new initiative, and it's one of the donors of the partnership. So maybe bringing some pioneer cities together with this long-term vision of really net zero by 2050 in the cities, but not forgetting the implementation gap that we have. Not only the ambition gap, I think it's action as well.
Thank you very much all for your inputs. We're unfortunately already running out of time, but we have a lot from what you're telling us to put on our to-do list for the next 6 months, the next year ahead, and in the next days to COP26. So thank you all very much for these interesting exchanges. And I'd love to continue the conversation, but we will have to continue it individually. We'll be very happy to continue working with all of you. Thank you again to all of the speakers who joined us today. Thank you as well to all of you who've been following us online. Please stay with us a couple more minutes as we announce the rest of the program. I'd like to thank again BMU and GIZ for organizing such a great conference and giving us this opportunity to join for a full day of Mobilize Your City. We're really proud after 5 years to be able to share the results from the first completed projects and to bring together such great partners. If you'd like to read more about that, please visit our website, mobilizeyourcity.net. Also check out our newsletter and social media. Thanks again to everyone and enjoy the rest of the program today. Back to you, Cathy.
Merci. Thank you, Eleonore. Thank you. I hope to see you soon face to face. In these times, you know, I do miss to have people around, but I do have people now around in the studio, ladies and gentlemen. So don't switch off the live stream. Please stay with us because we are still continuing with our program here at the Transport and Climate Change Week 2021. It's a blast to have you on board from wherever you're joining us today, yesterday, the day before yesterday, the whole week. Thanks again for joining, watching, debating, inspiring, telling your thoughts and of course letting us know what are your priorities. It's not over yet, as I mentioned, because I'd like to have a quick wrap-up with the strong souls behind the Transport and Climate Change Week. So with me now is Jana, Valerie and Friedel, the core of the organization team, the heart. This is where the heartbeat really gets different amplitudes. But you are really the key focal points of that whole production of that Transport Week. So Jana, I'd like to start with you. 5 days are now behind us, but it's only 5 days that are visible on camera. The preparation took a little bit longer, almost a whole year. So first of all, how do you feel? How relaxed are you now on day 5, Friday? And of course, can you give us a glimpse of what has been the highlight for you in that times of preparation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, I'm starting to feel human again. So I feel just really relieved. I'm really happy with the result. We met and actually exceeded our expectations, and we received a lot of feedback from the international community, from our participants, from the speakers, from our guests. So yeah, overall, really positive feedback. And actually, my highlight was working together with this whole supportive team, not only in advance of the event, but also during this event. We had like a super supportive team in the back, be it our interns who supported us in the back, like basically everywhere, be it social media, event platform, etc. So all that you saw was just basically their work. And for sure, our colleagues from all over the world, like from all over the globe, who organized several events. And then for sure our host here in Berlin, the GIZ Berlin representation, who hosted us here this week. And then for sure Sendewerk, our production company, who was really, really patient with us and who was really, really supportive with all of our last minute changes, with managing up to 200 speakers and several calls. So a huge, huge thank you to all of you. So Simon, Roshdi, Clemens, Jürgen, Gary, Julia, Simon, thank you so, so much. And for sure also a huge thank you to Ute, who supported us as our technical director. You were amazing. Thank you. I really enjoyed working with you the past weeks and especially the last week. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's a whole team that makes the magic possible. It looks very easy on camera, as you just pointed out, and as it's visible, but to make or to build up a TV production, it's not as easy as it sounds. We do have behind the scenes footage, by the way, on our social media, so have a look into our director's office with all the different machines working day and night for you. Valerie is with us, and Valerie, of course, you were responsible for the participants and the country delegations. I do remember our beautiful world cafes with live audiences from all over the world. What has been going on the side of the audience? Maybe you can give us a glimpse. We have been live streamed in 13 different time zones. Was everybody awake?
Yes, they were. Like Jana said, there was an overall very positive feedback, but ultimately we did this week for our participants and our partner countries. So we're very, very happy to see that we had more than 1,500 users on our event platform. There was a lot of engagement on social media, in our session chat, and also in the coffee rooms. And there was a lot of positive energy also in the regional and country hubs, where there has been going on a lot of peer learnings and knowledge exchange. So thank you very much also for the organizers of those sessions. And and overall, the Transport and Climate Change Week mobilized an entire global community of change makers, and it made this community even stronger and more visible. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Valerie, for pointing out, bringing together the transport community and, of course, the transport family, as we figured that out already on day one, on Monday, when we were looking on our graphic recording. Last but not least, with us in the studio now is Friedel. And Friedel, 30 sessions were run from the studio, but of course, as Valerie just pointed out, we did have some regional hubs, regional events, more than 30 other regional events taking place. You were kind of the mastermind eyes also behind the program. Did it all work out the way you imagined it and planned it on the desk, or were there some changes on the way forward?
Yeah, thank you, Kati, for that question. Certainly, it worked out, even though we also did a lot of short-time adjustments. Organizing this Transport Week surely has been a very mind-blowing operation. You pointed it out, we had more than 60 sessions organized by our friends and colleagues at GIZ around the world, but also together with a lot of partner organizations, countless who contributed with speakers, with session facilitators, with experts, without who surely it wouldn't have been possible to put together such an amazing program. Secondly, I want to point out that in the preparation, I sometimes thought that we have created a monster that has become too crazy to handle. The Transport Week is too big and we can't really follow up on everything that we have planned. But this week I realized that the creature that the Transport Week surely is actually strong and powerful and is able to make a difference. So this week we learned a lot about solutions for changing transport that are already in action, and so the week really gave me hope for the transition that needs to happen over the next decade. And finally, of course, I must thank the Federal German Ministry for the Environment, for their very generous and their continuous support. This has been the fourth time that you have enabled us to do the Transport Week. So thank you again for your trust and your support. And we look forward to work with you on the next Transport Week in 2022.
Absolutely. We are all thrilled and excited to debate further in times of the crisis, in times of the pandemic, in times of a climate protection law that were just seen yesterday in the German parliament. But I do see Daniel Bongartz. Oh, thank you very much. Project lead, GIZ. Thank you. Well, thanks, ladies and gentlemen. This is really a teamwork, and a few names were also mentioned out. So thank you, everybody behind the scenes. I don't, continue again with the names, but just the graphic recorder was also part of the Transport Week, and the interpreters who are actually translating what we're just saying, and enabling us to speak really with each other instead of just about each other. And of course, you, ladies and gentlemen, because what would be a Transport and Climate Change Week without this digital firework in the digital media? So thanks again for all your tweets, your postings with the hashtag. Please continue debating and discussing, because we need all of you on that journey going into a sustainable mobility, into a sustainable transport, and of course combining the topics of transport and climate change. Thanks from the studio here in Berlin. We do continue with the conference. There are still a few workshops going on, as it's already pointed out in the program. We are closing the studio now here, but I do hope to see you all for the next Transport Week. Stay healthy, stay curious, and never stop asking the most important questions going forward into our journey of the Transport and Climate Change Transport Week. Thank you very much for participating, and all the best for you.
you.